He's going to throw so much stuff at those defensive ends that their head by the third quarter is going to be spinning, trying to figure out what's happening. And that's how you go back to the Super Bowl last year. You get Mahomes pulling the ball out and having these free runs because Nick Bosa is crashing down the line of scrimmage. Those kind of things, I think, are going to be what Andy Reid needs to get into to slow down this pass rush.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
5 things to watch here on KC Sports Network, getting you ready for a playoff game. Love doing this. This is a playoff. 5 things to watch, getting you ready for Chiefs Texans in the AFC Divisional round on Saturday. This is all obviously brought to you by Batchelder Family Farms. You can now order Batchelder's fresh farm-raised products online in just a few clicks at batchelderfamilyfarms.com. And finally, you can visit their farm store for the freshest cuts and other locally sourced products. Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., 20810 South Prospect Avenue in Belton, Missouri. I am here with the hungriest member of KC Sports Network, Maddie Lane. Maddie, how are we doing? It's starting to feel like the season's really starting here in Kansas City.
Listen, we're here. You know, we've had the preseason, and then we had the preseason, and then we had the bye week, the time off, and then now it's time to gear up for the real NFL season. As it starts, it's a 4-week stretch when you include the time off between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. But we're here. The season started. I'm ready for it. It's always nice when you get to this time of year, especially with the Chiefs' success. And I don't mean to come at this from we're so spoiled, nothing matters kind of spot. But after so long, some of these games in late November, December kind of start to drag a little bit when you know the team's going to the playoffs, you know they're going to be competing, and now you're getting to the stuff football that really matters. It's a little shot of adrenaline, a little rejuvenation on the football season once you get to this point. And we're here. I'm ready for it. I cannot wait for this Saturday game, and I love that it's the first game on Saturday. That way you don't got to wade through any other playoff games. You just boom, get it done, get it over with, kick the feet up, and see who the Chiefs are going to play.
Yeah, you win this game, and then you get to just enjoy the rest of the weekend. And man, it's just so wild to think like nothing screams spoiled quite like being 15-1 with your starters, and kind of feeling like this team hasn't even come close to its peak, and kind of feeling all these vibes about like, hey, like there's a different version of this football team looming around the corner in 2025 in January, and I think that's about what we're about to experience here. That doesn't mean there's no questions for this football team. And one of them is, I think, the offensive line. Joe Tooney will be the left tackle for the team. I think Andy Reid has been uniquely capable of helping develop a game plan to help slow down an elite pass rush. And I think you're going to have a hard time finding a better pairing of pass rushers than what the Houston Texans have with Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, and so I think, like you said there, it's not about who's playing at left tackle. We here at KCSN pick a show this week. It's been talked about who should start at left tackle, who we would start at left tackle, so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter really who's out there. The end result is still, we just saw what this Texans pass rush did against the Chargers, and even their tackles. I know the interior offensive line of the Chargers this past week was bad, but their tackles are still very good. And yet the Texans kind of had a lot of success with their pass rush. So it doesn't matter who's playing left tackle or not. All that matters is you do got to slow down this Texans pass rush. You got to find a way to do it. And the Chiefs are going to have to face that challenge. Now, I will say, looking at the history and where this Texas defense comes from, that San Francisco 49ers kind of defensive coaching tree, Andy Reid is very used to seeing it. He has schemed against it numerous times in high leverage games, and he has made the jobs very difficult for an aggressive, downhill, gap shooting, penetrating defensive line. That's what the Texans have. And Andy Reid's going to do a lot of things to give him stuff to think about. There's going to be formation changes. You're going to have those guys where the Chiefs do the weird like double wingback set with a running back and a tight end. You're going to get jet motions. You're going to get screens. He's going to throw so much stuff at those defensive ends that their head by the third quarter is going to be spinning, trying to figure out what's happening. And that's how you go back the Super Bowl last year, you get Mahomes pulling the ball out and having these free runs because Nick Bosa is crashing down the line of scrimmage. Those kind of things I think are going to be what Andy Reid needs to get into to slow down this pass rush more so than whoever may or may not be starting at left tackle. It's just throwing the kitchen sink at those guys, making them really process the play rather than just pinning their ears back.
I think about, that obviously that's not the last, the last time that these, the Nick Bosa and the Chiefs lined up was in the Super Bowl. But I think about, a couple matchups ago, and actually, no, it wasn't the Super Bowl because they played in the regular season this year, but a few times ago, I just remember they had Nick Bosa in an absolute blender more than anything during the regular season. I think it might have even been coming out of a bye. It was Christian McCaffrey's first game as a San Francisco 49er. And they threw the kitchen sink at him in that game. And I think that exemplifies exactly what Andy Reid and this offense is capable of doing is, they had him, sprint out away. They chipped him quick game. They doubled him with a tight end. And then they introduced the jet sweep stuff too. And you think about McCole Hardman, he had a great day against, leaving Nick Bosa unblocked after everything that they kind of thrown at him the entirety of that game. They left him unblocked. And I think the thing that you hold tight to if you're a Chiefs fan is look, this is a very good pass rush. This team has been able to solve very good pass rushes in the past, and anything is on the table, and play call selections on the table. I saw our guy, his Dirk, is talking about a little bit earlier today, talking about, hey, how do you help an offensive tackle? Some of the breakdowns and stuff, maybe talking not as much about chip help. There's more than just chip help that comes into play when you are looking at trying to, slow down an elite pass rush. It's play calling too. And so I think that's one of the biggest strengths of Andy Reid is he's able to not just utilize some of the personnel decisions as far as and pass protection decisions with, chips and doubles and whatnot. It's also, hey, let's just get the ball out of our hands quickly. Let's, get 3-step drops out of shotgun or catch and throws out of the shotgun. And let's throw screen passes and let's run jets and let's run the ball a little bit, right? All these things can kind of help you slow down, a difficult and a challenging pass rush. And look, I think there's challenges on the interior too. If Danico Autry does kick inside, I think he can present some options and some difficulties for you there too. So there's a lot for this team to think about. That's one of the ways I think that this Texans team can, potentially come in and upset the Chiefs. But you best believe that the Chiefs are going to have a lot of answers.
Yeah, well, and two of the things you said there, I wanted to swing back to real quick is it's not just this defensive ends either. It's not just Hunter and Will Anderson. Danico Autry's been great kicking into the inside and being an interior pass rusher over guards and centers throughout the season, but especially last week in the playoffs. Tim Settle, I know he ran his mouth a little bit before the last time the Chiefs and the Texans played and it bit him a little bit. He's had a pretty good year as an interior pass rusher. They have other guys besides just those defensive ends, and the Texans are top 5 in the NFL in rate of running stunts or games. They run a lot of stunts in games, and they get pressures on them a lot. So you got to be aware of that, especially if you are shuffling guys along the offensive line or maybe playing 2 guards next to each other or whatever it may be. You got to be a little wary of how this offensive line will pick up those stunts and stuff. So that's worth noting. And then you also want to talk about the quick passing. I wonder if the Texans kind of adjust what they did. The quick passing game tore them apart last time these two teams faced each other. They ran a lot of man coverage. They got beat by the quick passing game a lot. Well, when you're pinning your ears back as a defensive line and going after the quarterback and the ball keeps coming out in under 2.5 seconds and you can't even get home if you have a free rush, that's frustrating and it makes what you're doing kind of pointless. I do wonder if you do see more stuff where they maybe spy somebody, if they have guys trying to maybe be a little less aggressive and get their hands in some passing lanes to go along with more zone coverage in the back. I am curious how the Texans go about changing what they did, knowing that there might be a quick passing game coming. And then conversely, do the Chiefs have a counter for that? Do the Chiefs have something to catch the Texans who might have to adjust how they play? It's the whole cat and mouse game that you get when you come playoff time. I don't think anyone's better than Andy Reid in these moments, Kent.
No, for sure. He's the absolute best, and he has incredible instincts. And you don't anticipate some of the calls that he makes. He makes the most timely screen passes you could possibly imagine. If you're watching, you don't anticipate them, coming at any different time. I think I think the Texans, like I think you talked about a little bit on Matter Days on Wednesday, that you know the Texans kind of broke some tendencies with what they typically do defensively against the Chiefs the last time around. They had a lot more, man. They played a lot more man. They didn't play as much quarters as they had in matchups prior. And I think that's worth at least paying attention to is, do the Chiefs anticipate that maybe the Texans are going to play a little bit more normal to what they've played in the past? And if that's the case, like I think they'll have good answers. I think the Chiefs have plenty of evergreen answers, regardless of what kind of tendency that the Texans are going to play with. And that's, I think, what you kind of hold to. This team should adapt and adjust. But I think it starts up front and what kind of decisions that they make with their offensive line.
Well, speaking of adapting and adjusting, let's head on over to our Matter Day pal, Matt Hamilton. He's going to talk about how the Chiefs secondary, specifically Trent McDuffie, might be able to adapt and match up with Nico Collins.
Appreciate you guys. And the one thing I'm looking for in this game is the matchup of Trent McDuffie against Nico Collins. With Joe Mixon being a little banged up, as good as his Chiefs run defense is, with all the injuries the Texans have in the receiving core, Nico Collins is really the one guy that they have that can kind of break this game open and add offense and give them a semblance of a chance to upset the Chiefs. And when you go back to that first matchup, Nico had an okay game. He had 60 yards on the day, but when he was matched up with Trent McDuffie, when we got that matchup, just 3 catches for 5 yards. McDuffie had a couple of those tackles for loss on screen plays, was super aggressive getting back there, which is huge because Nico, when he gets the ball in his hands, he can fly. Love seeing the aggressiveness from him in that game. And McDuffie also had an interception when Nico was targeted against him. So if he can repeat that type of a performance, and I think we see him travel maybe a little bit more with Nico than we saw in that game because Tank Dell obviously is out, having gotten hurt in that first matchup. So I do think maybe we see Trent travel a little more with Nico, and that's going to be the key, keeping Nico off the box score, limiting his game-breaking ability. If McDuffie can do that, I don't see a way that the Texans are able to beat the Chiefs in this game. So that's what I'm looking for. I'll send it back to you guys for more.
Thank you, Hamilton. That's going to be a heavyweight matchup between those two guys that are at the top of their games. Now we're going to hit a quick break before we come back and finish up with 3 more things to watch for this Chiefs-Texans matchup.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Welcome back to KCSN's 5 Things to Watch in this upcoming divisional round playoff game between the Chiefs and the Texans. We have heard 2 things. Now we are off to Beef of the Week, where the guys are talking about Joe Mixon and how the Chiefs can stop the Texans' run game.
It's Beef of the Week here on 5 Things. Tucker Franklin, Matt Varim, hanging out with you here, giving you the Beef of the Week presented by Batch Elder Family Farms. Look, if you're in Kansas City and you've been ordering from Batch Elder Family Farms and you've been following them on Twitter at Batch Elder Family Farms, you know that there's a lot of snow on the ground, so you can't really get out to Batch Elder Family Farms right now. Farmers markets closed for the season as well. Farmers markets don't really like winter. But you can still take advantage of the best beef around. BatchElderFamilyFarms.com. Go to their shop those beef bundles as we are nearing right up on playoff time for the Kansas City Chiefs. We're right up on it. You got to have these beef bundles ready to rock for your game day watch parties, your tailgates, wherever you are. You need to have Batch Elder Family Farms beef, which you visit them, BatchElderFamilyFarms.com. And look, these teams just played not too long ago. Week 16 is when these 2 teams played. Tim Settle had a little bit of beef with this team, and they've been relatively quiet this week, man. I think that they kind of learned their lesson. Yeah, learned their lesson the first time around. But the Chiefs do have some beef, kind of a multifaceted beef here from us here at Beef of the Week. They have a beef with a guy on the Houston Texans who has experience beating them in an AFC championship game and in a playoff game, which is pretty rare in the Patrick Mahomes era.
So Joe Mixon has been a long-time star running back and was, of course, on the Bengals for most of his career. And now this year, it's his first year in Houston, and he had over 1,000 yards rushing despite missing a few games. He's played very well.
Great year.
In their first matchup this year, he didn't do a ton. He was limited to like 50 some odd yards in the game. But when he played in the AFC title game in 2021, of any player on either team, he had more yards than anybody. He had 115 total yards, 88 on the ground, 27 in the air. And it was a big part of the reason that the Bengals found a way to win that game, 27-24 in overtime. And so if you're the Chiefs, look, now there are plenty of guys on the Chiefs who would say, I don't even know that game happened, because there are guys like Karlaftis and McDuffie who are busy partying on campus and could care less. But then there are guys like Chris Jones, who certainly remember that Joe Mixon was on that team on that day. And in the presser on Wednesday, Chris Jones, normally you don't just give away your game plan. And Chris Jones, got to stop Joe Mixon. That's the game plan. Just straight up. So the Chiefs, their beef, both internally and emotionally, and also actual physical upfront beef, they got to get the job done. Joe Mixon is a key to this game. He was a key 3 years ago, and the Chiefs did not handle their business against Joe Mixon. This time around, they got to get the job done.
We talk about this on That Football Show a lot. The Texans offense, isn't necessarily dripping with weapons. It's not oozing with weapons like it was maybe, say, at the beginning of the season when they had Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and some other guys on that team. Joe Mixon is one of the last remaining weapons outside of Nico Collins that is still on this team. And so one of the big things for this team is going to be stopping the run with the beef up front, with Chris Jones, with Mike Pennell, you name it. Tershawn Wharton's going to need to get involved as well, those interior guys, because the interior offensive line for the Texans, not very good. And we saw that kind of play out in the matchup last time. I'm sure the Texans are going to have a good counter game plan for that, but that beef up there, that beef up front for the Chiefs defensive line, I'm curious to see kind of how they do approach stopping the run, because that might be the only dimension that this Texans team has coming into this game.
In week 16 when they played them, and this was with Tank Dell, of course, on the field for a majority of the games, the Chiefs played a ton of base 4-3 defense, a ton of it. And they basically said, if you want to throw a little bit here and there, fine. You're not going to run the ball. Yeah. Now you take Tank Dell out of that equation. And Houston in that game played a ton of 2 tight end sets. Do they do it again and try to power forward? I think they kind of have to. Are they really going to try to go spread here with the receivers that they have? Are they going to do that? So I think this game revolves completely around, look, if you stop Joe Mixon and you do anything against Nico Collins, that offense is pretty cooked. They just don't have the guys. I would expect the Chiefs, as Chris Jones basically flat out said in the press conference, I think they're gonna dedicate a lot of resources into making sure that he does not have a banner day as he had 3 years ago in Arrowhead.
Look, and if you think that the Chiefs are going to be able to stop the run and they're going to be able to move on to this game like Matt and I do, there's a potential they play the Buffalo Bills, and you can get some bison meat at BadShelterFamilyFarms.com as well. Go ahead, get ahead of that. Get ahead. Plan. We don't play the game, Matt. We talked about that. We don't play the game, so we can look ahead. BadShelterFamilyFarms.com. They got the beginner bison bundle. They got the bison gift bag, the bison gift box. Go check those out. BadShelterFamilyFarm.com/store/specials is where you can find that. Work ahead. Get that ready for your next tailgating adventure or your game watch party. You can join us at Holiday Distillery if you want to watch party as well. But that's going to do it for us here at Beef of the Week in That Football Show. Let's sit back for more 5 things.
Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Matt. That's big. If the Texans are going to get going, if the Texans are going to stress the Chiefs defense, it's going to be through Mixon's legs, I think. So that's a big key to watch out for. Speaking of keys, guys, come on. It's pick time. We got to go over to Benny. We got to see what picks he's got. You got your pen. You got your paper. You're ready to write these down. So let's go check in with Benny and see the picks he's got.
All right. Appreciate you. What's good, everybody? Welcome into this section of 5 things. My name is Ben Heisler. Glad that you are along for the ride. And it has been a fun ride going through our underdog plays over the course of the season, especially in December and January. Picked up a bit of a slow start. Ended up going 12-3-0 since week 14. Got 3 more plays on the board as the divisional round kicks off with the Texans and the Chiefs. If you have not signed up for Underdog, the postseason is a fantastic time to give it a try. Make sure you all use that promo code QTSN. If you do so, you will be eligible for a new customer free pick. And it also happens to be with Patrick Mahomes to go higher than 0.5 total yards. This game also has some fun significance for me. This was the last playoff game that I was at between the Texans and the Chiefs. That monster comeback on another very cold day over at Arrowhead in January. So make sure you go ahead and use that promo code KCSN. You can score up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your first deposit. Plus, you get this divisional round free pick of Patrick Mahomes to go higher than 0.5 total yards, which he certainly did the last time these teams met, both in the regular season this year, but also in the playoffs many years ago. All right, let's go into our picks for this year. We're going to start on the Texans side and go with Dalton Schultz. Now, if you caught my appearance with Tucker and Verderam on the football show, you might notice that this number has climbed from what I gave it out, which is at 31.5. We're now seeing it now at 39.5 over on Underdog for receiving yards. So I don't think the value is there anymore. He could still very easily clear this number. I'll get to that in just a second. But instead, I'm going to target Dalton Schultz for, you guessed it, his targets. His line, again, as I mentioned, went from 31 now all the way up to 39.5. But it makes a lot of sense, right? Because the Chiefs all season long have been a sieve for tight ends to go ham. They led the league in yards allowed to the tight end position. They gave up the second most reception to the tight end spot and also the seventh most amount of targets. If you go back to the game in December, Schultz was second on the team behind Nico Collins in total targets. He had 8 in the game. And this game, in this matchup, kind of feels like there's going to be a similar game script involved. Between the fact that Chiefs know this type of weather, know this type of environment, Houston now having to go on the road, which CJ Stroud has had much worse numbers, but they're going to have to throw the ball because of Kansas City's stout run defense. Collins is maybe going to be limited a little bit on the outside. He's so good, but again, there's going to be some swirly winds at Arrowhead. Schultz is that safe play in the middle of the field where Stroud can get it anywhere, but you know the check down option is going to be there. And I would imagine that Schultz racks up targets in this game. I think it's a check down city type of matchup. I think he ends up somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 8 targets, maybe even more. And so I think that we get some good value by going higher than 5.5 targets for Dalton Schultz. Let's move over to the Chiefs side and go with Xavier Worthy. I'd like him to go higher than 4.5 rushing yards in the matchup. I was talking about consistency, staples throughout the course of the season, one of them being targeting, the Kansas City Chiefs opponent tight ends and really taking advantage of those numbers there. The Xavier Worthy rushing yards prop has been, the higher lower has been very favorable for all of us this year. And while the number is maybe a little bit higher than the traditional 0.5 rushing yards up to 2.5 total rushing yards, 4.5 is still too low. If you go back all the way to week 10, Xavier Worthy has gone over this line in every game that he's played when he's had at least one rushing attempt. And there have really been only 2 games since week 10, one of which was week 18, which you kind of just throw the whole thing out the window in that matchup against Denver, that he didn't have the ball in his hands as a rusher. He's growing in this offensive scheme, been leading the team in targets the last several weeks. He put up some terrific numbers. And again, think about the weather in this matchup. They're going to want to try and find creative ways to get him the ball in space. No better way than to send him in motion and use sort of that inside zone running scheme for Worthy. I like him in this opportunity. I like this matchup for him. It also does by using him as a runner, it keeps the tough Houston defense and their pass rush at bay a little bit, keeps them guessing, keeps them on their toes. And so for Worthy to go over 4.5, this is a number that I think is still very reasonable and maybe even expected to climb up to 5.5 by the time the week is done. Last one on the board for this week is Travis Kelce. Good old number 87. And I'm going to take a little bit of the bonus play here where you can actually get a bit of a higher cash out by having him go over 0.5 receiving touchdowns. Now, you might be saying to yourself, okay, why take the risk on the touchdown? I'll get to that in a second. If you look at some of the numbers for Kelce in the postseason, obviously, many of you know the stat that he's now the all-time NFL receptions leader in postseason history. Still trails in receiving yards and touchdowns behind only Jerry Rice. But but Mahomes and Kelsey have 17 total touchdowns in their playoff career. That's the most by any duo in NFL history, with only Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski behind them. Kelsey has a nose for the end zone in the postseason in particular. And I think the value on the board relative to the receiving yards are just, fairly low. You have to go back all the way to the Super Bowl in 2020 to find the last time that Travis Kelsey did not hit above 70 receiving yards in a game. But the number is at 52.5, and it almost kind of feels like a bit of a trap. Yeah, Houston's had some issues in stopping the tight ends this year. But if you again look at the specifics of the play and look at the value on the board, Houston has allowed the third most touchdowns to tight ends this year. So we're not going to have to worry about yards. You're not going to have to worry about whether or not the 70-yard streak is in play. Go with the guy that's got 17 touchdowns in his playoff career, and that's Travis Kelsey. And I like him to score again against Houston, against a team that has given up several tight end touchdowns throughout the course of the year. You know that Mahomes is going to look his way. You know that there's going to be plenty of opportunities and targets in the red zone for 87. I think this is another game where he has a nose for the end zone. So again, plays on the board for the divisional round. I am going to go with Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans to go higher than 5.5 targets. Going to the Kansas City side, give me Xavier Worthy higher than 4.5 rushing yards, and then Travis Kelsey to go higher than 0.5 receiving touchdowns. Make sure you guys also include, if for anyone that is a new Underdog player, you can get that free pick of Patrick Mahomes to go higher than 0.5 total yards. Those are our plays for the divisional round. Hopefully it is another fun matchup at Arrowhead. For those of you that are attending, stay warm, bring some cardboard, have a few drinks if you're interested, but be safe and have fun. And good luck with your plays over on Underdog this week. And with that, sending it back your way. Go Chiefs.
Thank you, Benny. We got those marked down. We are 4 things through here on 5 things. We got one more thing to talk about for the Chiefs-Texans matchup. I think it's time. We got to head over to the weirdest place the only weird games corner, and hear from Seth, Nate, and Josh and see a little bit about the Chiefs deep ball.
Some of the best things are limited releases, or they get teased way out in advance. I don't know how many big video game fans we have listening right now, or how many I'm talking to right now. But the Switch 2 got officially teased this week, announcing that the next big Nintendo console was on the way. And I mention all of that because we were kind of kicking around, what's the thing that we're going to talk about here in this edition of 5 Things, looking ahead to this playoff game against the Texans. And we landed on the deep ball. I take that long road to our one thing because it feels like we saw a lot of trailers for the deep ball. We even got a little bit of a taste. Maybe we got a little hands-on demo in St. Joe this summer.
Ooh.
And then we just had to wait. Is the deep ball coming back in time for the playoffs? Joshua Briscoe, Seth Kaiser, Nate Taylor of Only Weird Games. I think we're going to answer that question, but I think you may know where we're headed. Seth, you just wrote about this exact thing in the Chief from the North newsletter, mnchiefsfan.substack.com. We finally going to see the true debut of the deep ball against the Texans?
Everything lines up to where it would make sense for that to be yes. Schematically, opponent strength-wise, it's like, well, Seth, they've got good corners and a good pass rush. Yes, but I really think that they're going to try to clamp down on the Chiefs' short game, which is how Mahomes, other than Lamar Jackson, Mahomes probably had the best game of any quarterback against that Texans defense this year, and they just diced them up short. Just short throw after short throw after short throw. The Texans, there's no way. They know they can die a death by 1,000 paper cuts against the Chiefs. They know it. They know their offense, unless something radically changes, their offense isn't putting up 28, 31 points. It's just not where they're at right now. And so they can't die death of 1,000 paper cuts. And so I would expect to see them try to suffocate some of the underneath stuff, try to stop some of those, quick throws, some of those wide receiver screens, some of those things that the Chiefs have been doing really well to keep Xavier Worthy involved, even as he's generally not been a downfield target. Worthy looks much more comfortable within the framework of the offense. Hollywood Brown is back and now has 2 games under his belt and a full month of practice after that. A lot of time to be acclimated, a lot of time for a new install. Kelsey and Hopkins take up attention underneath. Everything makes sense to formulate a game plan where you take some shots down the field because it benefits the game plan against the Texans. And if you're thinking beyond that, if you're thinking what the Bills and the Ravens you want them to be worried about, if you're thinking what whoever from the NFC makes it out of there alive is thinking about, you want them to have visions of Xavier Worthy or Hollywood Brown or even Justin Watson catching a ball 50 yards down the field and saying, oh crap, we have to worry about that again with these guys. So I think it makes sense. I think this is the time to do it. I think everyone's best situated to do it. If it's not now, kind of feels like never.
Right.
Are we going to get the payoff of all of that? It was obviously, we know, Nate, that it was something they wanted to do. It was a different version of the offense, and it was a long time ago. But it's not like we're just saying, hey, you guys should consider this. This was going to be a lot more of the offense until Hollywood got hurt.
Yeah, and with the injury to Rashee Rice, obviously that takes some attention away too to open up deep shots. I love this because it's who Mahomes is from like just a pure essence. Like he wants to throw the ball over the top of the defense as much as possible. And I'm not saying these guys are the same players because obviously every player is different, but we do have evidence. If a pass is thrown in the correct spot with the correct velocity and touch, you can run away from the Texans secondary. We just saw Ladd McConkey do it. And the Chiefs, we are led to believe, have faster receivers than Ladd McConkey, despite how great Ladd McConkey is. So if you can get behind the defense, whether that's Hollywood or, Xavier Worthy or, Justin Watson, like you can beat them over the top. And by doing that, it just creates other issues structurally as to like maybe opening up some of the short throws, the timing throws, some of the RPO game. But this is the reason why they signed Hollywood Brown and why they acquired Xavier Worthy in the draft. It's to have elite level speed, either go over the top of a quality defense or be the reason a quality defense cannot necessarily be comfortable the way they normally would against other teams.
We talked a little bit about some other ways this wide receiver crew's coming together this week on Only Weird Games, and we'll be back on Tuesday to hopefully talk about a nice, breezy, deep ball-filled Chiefs playoff victory. But regardless of what it is, we'll be back on Tuesday.
Awesome, fellas. Great job. Yo, that is it. That's 5 things. I mean, if the Chiefs come out and they win all 5 of these things, 4 of these things, plus you win on your picks of Benny, hey, it's going to be a great weekend for the Chiefs, for us Chiefs fans, for everybody. So we appreciate it always as you guys listening. Thank you for tuning into KCSN's 5 Things. As always, we will be doing a post-game show right after the game, right after the Chiefs win, or if they lose, we'll still do it. But after they win, if you don't have plans for this game, hey, you can still, I believe, RSVP at Holiday Distillery. Go check out the watch party there. Tucker's going to be there, BJ, Josh Briscoe. You just got to let us know. The link will be in the description. Just let them know that you're going to show up and you guys can come hang out and watch the game together. Besides that, hey, guys, go Chiefs. The season is now starting. First game of the year. You got let's ride.